When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ledlow, and enjoy today's episode. Well, everybody, this is the Fearless Mindset Podcast. This is Mark Ledlow, and I'm honored to have a good friend of mine. I've known him for I don't know how many years yet. We met in Beverly Hills. I think I just got off a detail protecting somebody. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to drop by the local establishment there at the restaurant there in the hotel. And we just started talking about girls and LA and whatever it was.
Sports.
And
yep.
Sports. Oh, yeah. You told me you worked for ESPN. I'm like, what? You work for ESPN? How cool is that? And then we just about your ESPN experiences. And I was like almost watching ESPN, listening to ESPN, but you're talking in my ear, and I'm like, that was fun just hearing your stories.
That's how you meet good people, and it's amazing when you keep in touch. Hey, and if I got glasses on, you might as well do it as well.
Heck, why not? Let's have fun with it.
Exactly. Let's do it.
So, Dave, you are now in North Carolina, ALS. You're the chief operating officer out there, and you have a new role, and you're excited about it because it hit home with your mother, and it's something you're giving back to that organization, and it's close and dear to your heart. Go ahead and elaborate on that.
Well, no, thank you, Mark. I mean, it's I started over a year and a half ago, and I used to be on the ALS chapter board in California. I lost my mom in the early 90s, but I was a TV anchor back then, and so I was well deep into my career and didn't get a chance other than volunteering to host some of the Jerry Lewis telethons every year to actually get to do something about it. So it's just really been volunteer. And so when this chapter expanded what they were doing here throughout the state of North Carolina, it just sounded perfectly for me. So, you want to love what you do, and you obviously you have that why behind what you do. And, my why is pretty simple because a lot of people go through what is the most horrible disease. And, I can say, what, I understand, and we're here to help. And so that's what you do. And then I think sometimes from a functional management position, in a lot of industries, they need to bring in people that come from a variety of backgrounds and experience because, I spent over 30 years in the sports media industry. So, I got the gift of gab, but you got to be able to tell a story. You got to be able to understand what social media is and all the electronic and digital platforms. And so I think that is what nonprofits are trying to do now because we got to cut through the clutter. There's a lot of nonprofits out there, but there's also a lot of giving people, and you just have to connect with them.
So that was what ALS organization decided to do with you because they knew what you did in broadcasting with ESPN and over how many years that experience that was. They knew you'd probably be able to bring in partnerships from the sports world into the community. And that kind of what their thinking was?
Yeah, well, just thinking out of the box, thinking non-traditional. And when you come from a for-profit industry and you're an executive in a for-profit industry, it's different. The bottom line is important. You answer to stockholders and Wall Street, and the nonprofit world is different, but it's still the same as well. You obviously want to make more than you spend, but you have a little bit more of a payback on it because it's going to something that really, really has some meaning, and it's not, lost the next month in something else. So really, yeah, I just want to be creative, and I think sports is always one of the great connectors that we have in general. Music is another one because you hear a song and you remember usually about the year that you used to listen to that all the time, and so it brings back memories. I think sports is one of the great connectors too, and so we've teamed up recently with the NFL Players Association because NFL players like Steve Gleason and others have gotten ALS, and we don't know why, but just like those that have been in the military, there's a much more greater possibility that they will get ALS. So I just, wanted them to be able to tell their story and us to tell our story and do things together to try to raise awareness.
Yeah, great cause. I mean, ALS has done a lot for the medical world, and, give somebody a quality of life, if they can help that in that situation.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, because, when I was in Los Angeles with ESPN is when the Ice Bucket Challenge happened. And I was challenged, and I obviously did it. And, it did so much for ALS, but what it did is it afforded research and doctors and trials to be able to go to work and see what they can do. And inside of those trials and research, they're not just working on ALS. They find something, they're able to say, look, let's share it with those folks who deal with Alzheimer's or dementia, because they're finding, when you're dealing with something like this, you're going to find similarities, and you can share information more. So it didn't matter what organization had that ultimate moment like the Ice Bucket Challenge provided, but now people don't realize how much research is being done because of that for other industries as well.
Now, the funds, is it the funds coming from the federal government or from other organizations for research and development to find a cure for that, or what does that look like?
Most of it comes into our national organization and to us here in each state. But it can be funded just for research. Somebody may have lost someone. Somebody may just have the means and the funds, and they want to make sure that money goes to research. And so that's how a lot of it is pulled in. There is a lot of government assistance that has been, worked out, especially with, dealing with the military and working on that to try to solve and get some answers together. So you pull your funds from many different areas, but just like anything else, there's a lot of cutbacks in the federal government or whatever. So you really have to rely on going out and telling your story and raising the funds. Most importantly, just so that those people that do have it in your particular state, they can have everything they need to keep that comfort in life, or to make sure that they get all the treatments that are necessary. They can't handle those expenses themselves. So, we want to be able to be there and have loaner equipment and wheelchairs and things that they can use when they need it.
What is for treatment? What's the cost look like on average if there's no, assistance from Social Security, disability, or Medicaid? What does that look like out of pocket for some? Is it hard to say?
It's hard to say because it varies. I mean, it's very expensive but it just depends on how advanced, how quickly it might be progressing, and where you are at that point. But, obviously insurance provides a lot of help, but then, insurance doesn't. So, there's a lot of different ways that people can file for things in their state through grants and everything as well. But if any of you who are listening know, if you've gone through that in one way, shape, or form in your own family, that it's quite a process, and it's not a process that you really have much expertise in, or you really want to spend that much time, because you're spending so much focus on the health side of it and dealing with your loved ones. So it's very tough. And I think education and getting the word out is one of the most important things. And it comes back to why I'm doing this. We've got to go to where the younger people are. And that's why we have a Twitch channel on social media now, because, the gamers and the sports talk and the news talkers are now, and that's where they get their consumption. You doing a podcast, we have an ALS podcast that provides information, but that's what you have to do. You have to meet the people where they are and where they consume content the most.
Yeah, we were talking offline about social media and how everything's changed and the networks have changed and how people get their information. Now you have probably thousands of podcasters out there. And back in the golden years when you were in broadcasting for ESPN, were you a producer or executive or something like that with ESPN back then?
Yeah, I was an executive, but I started out on the air. And even when I was an executive, in Los Angeles, running ESPN Los Angeles, I was still on the air because I'd host the Lakers pre-game and sidelines during their broadcast. So I've always kind of been either on the air and also as management as well. And that always kind of gave me both sides to be able to see that.
So during that time, we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have Twitter and all that. And, but like we're talking about, had a lot of interaction like Kobe Bryant and different athletes, and they didn't have like a cell phone to take a picture. You got a picture by the photographer of the newspaper that was there back then. It was a different time.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I was telling you, The Last Dance, the documentary of Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. That's what I noticed when I saw myself in one of the episodes was there was nobody around us holding a camera up and taking a photo. And I remember that because those were the early days. I mean, we had, of course, until 9/11, we also didn't travel around with a ton of security and all the things that even private planes have to go through, or having a hotel swept and checked a day before the arrival of a team like the Los Angeles Lakers or the Dallas Cowboys. People don't realize what goes on now because of certain other world events that we went through, because sports is such a fixture, and dealing in what you deal with, that they always have to be careful because sports can be looked at as the perfect thing to attack if you're an enemy, because that's what's so cherished by Americans. So, social media has done a lot of good things. I think it's done more harm than it's done good in many ways, because, the landscape we see now is most people think that everything they see on TV is news. And when it ended up happening is, when CNN and Fox and even ESPN in terms of sports, when they were created, you had to fill the time somehow. So a lot of those shows on CNN and Fox, they're not filled by news anchors, just delivering the news from an unbiased standpoint. They're delivered by opinionated talk show hosts. So, you grow up and that's your only way that you're relating to understanding what the media is. You now think that everything you hear 24/7 is news. So it's, I think it's created a lot of things, and then it's hard to police social media. So I think the trolling and the anonymity and in many situations it's just got out of hand. But at the same time, for sports, there's millions of dollars being made from the fact that people have fantasy football. They have social media to keep that fervor alive in between games, which is one of the reasons why now it's a couple of $1 trillion industry.
Who would have guessed? The Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, I can't keep them. I mean, there's people that have 4 different social media accounts, and they got to have a team just to support that. Like I had Frank Murr just on the other day, and I was talking to one of his managers, and he's telling me, he has a whole entire team of guys that monitor all of the stuff, because you're training, you're fighting, and how do you have time to do all that stuff? It's almost like his own business you got to manage. It's weird.
I think that's a great point, because they really are. I saw the boxing industry over the years become those guys cannot avoid and let everybody else around them take care of them. I mean, they have to turn into business people themselves, and especially now with the amount of money that everyone has got their hand out to take away from them, or their platform on social media. Just an athlete today that says, okay, does it really matter what I think about what's going on in the world? And so they have to take a real hard look at that, because they can't avoid it and say, nobody cares what I think, because there's a lot of young kids that grow up that do want to hear what they think.
So is the biggest consumer, that's a good point, the biggest consumer in the sports world, are they the millennials that are that want the information from these different social media platforms? Is that kind of what the consumer base looks like?
I think that's an interesting one, Mark, because there's so many demos. In the TV and the radio world, we used to have that prime advertising demo as men 25 to 54. So, when you reach that, well, you didn't suddenly lose your effectiveness to buy anything in life. There was that sweet spot in there, but it was also too wide of a sweet spot. We used to tell people that, you say 25 to 54, but how many 25-year-olds hang out with 54-year-olds and vice versa? So you really needed to narrow it down a lot. And so I think I think what they're trying to do now is they're trying to figure out how they can get the young people that never had anything before social media, how they can keep them engaged, because they feel as if they've got a shorter attention span. So that's why, what podcasts and how long they are and how short they are. And that's why those things are more important than they were when we used to just, host a couple hour long radio shows, but you ask some kids probably get in their car and don't even realize what AM radio is anymore.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I talked to a lot of guys in the bodyguard world, our military guys. They call me for some advice or whatever, and they go, dude, I don't even listen to the radio. I don't even watch TV. Where do you get your information from? Oh, podcasts. And I found that out 2 months ago when I was watching this little project. I'm like, oh, okay. So they're going to YouTube and then podcasts, and they just don't want to hear the news. And so I'm wondering what the network survival rate is going to be and going the next, 5 to 10 years from now, what that's going to look like if that's the consumption change.
Well, part of it is the loss of identity too, because you think about it, when I was there in Los Angeles, it was ESPN 710 on the AM dial. And in Los Angeles, AM dial is still an important place because you get your news and your traffic and everything on AM. But, some people would say, I don't listen to the radio, but then then you'd find out that they did listen to ESPN 710. But the problem is that they would get in their car and their Wi-Fi would automatically connect their phone, which they were listening to us on their app. So they never went to the actual radio part of their radio and went to the AM dial, but they were still listening to us. It was just through a different form. So that's what made it tough, because technology had never caught up to, when you hear TV ratings for TV shows or sports games, it's ridiculous. There's no way that those are accurate ratings when they say nobody watched that game last night, because if you go to a sports bar, everybody's watching it in a sports bar, and they don't count those. They don't count 150 people standing around a bar watching the Super Bowl off of those TVs there. So there are only specific metered ones that they have partnerships with that are representing the entire population, and we know that's not the case. So it's
wow.
So you just have to flip things around, and you just have to figure out why and how people are consuming you right now.
Yeah, it's just changed so much in even the last 6 months. I mean, Spotify buying out Joe Rogan, his podcast. And then I had Spotify Mickey on just yesterday. We were doing a recording, and he was telling me that, yeah, they're just launching and expanding like crazy. I'm like, Spotify? Wow. So they're going to be challenging the TV networks as a new organizational venue for communication information. It's like, it's changing so fast. It's nuts.
When I was with ESPN, we had many meetings to decide how important podcasting would be back in the early days. And then, the big thing was you did it. You did a pretty good one, but there was really no way in the industry to monetize it because, it wasn't the traditional, okay, we're going to step aside and we're going to play some commercials. So, the guys like Adam Carolla, who just naturally learned how to, in the course of the conversation, just suddenly start talking about one of his sponsors or whatever, then they started to realize, wow, we got to reinvent this. We've got to somehow make this valuable. Sometimes the podcast would just be really an introduction or a calling card to some other platform, where you could find their sponsors on their website or something. So, we just, for years, we just couldn't even figure out, this is great. We knew people liked it, but how are we going to monetize it? How are we going to make money on it? And I think now you're really starting to see the collection, the explosion of content.
Yeah, which is crazy how much, I didn't know how much there was until I got on YouTube. And then Christopher Decker launched me on YouTube. I'm like, oh crap, there's millions of us up there. I'm like, wow. It just blew my mind on what was taking place. But pretty wild time we're in. I'm going to change the subject a little bit, and
yeah.
I know that working with the athletes were something you really enjoyed in the ESPN, and just in memory of Kobe, what was he like as just a man, as a businessman, and an athlete? Just kind of share with the audience that.
No, it's funny, Mark, because I got lucky because I got there during Kobe's closing last few seasons, and so I was an older guy, and he was kind of feeling like he was an older guy. So that kind of meant that, we were the guys that would share a glass of red wine on the road sometimes, because he just had a hard time relating to the young kids because he didn't have anything in common. And a lot of them didn't take things as seriously as what Kobe did. Kobe was just the ultimate competitor, and he hated losing. And that's why when Dwight Howard was there the first time, with him. They didn't get along because Dwight just could not get serious. And Kobe did love to joke around, but he did not once he got anywhere close to an arena or with his uniform on. So, people would ask me, kids would ask me, they'd say, what really made him great? And I'd say, look, it was one simple thing. And I traveled with Dirk Nowitzki when I was with the Dallas Mavericks years before that. They both had the same thing in common. When we'd pull up to a stadium or to a hotel the night before a game, it might be late. It might be 10:30, 11 o'clock, pulling up in Salt Lake City. Every other guy went up to his room. Kobe or Dirk, they grabbed a trainer and they went over to the gym, the arena. They'd pop some lights on and they'd get some shots in. So, he was the ultimate businessman. He had a vision for so many things. And you know what? I still can't believe we lost him because helicopters were such a big part of his life. That was his daily commute to get downtown and to land on top of the Marriott, the Ritz next to where I officed down there at LA Live. So it's just amazing to see how something like that can happen. But he was one of a kind, and just like everybody, he had his faults, but sometimes we don't realize and miss somebody until after they're gone. We don't realize their total impact that they had and how many people that they influenced along the way. The outpouring of emotions that we saw in those coming days afterwards, it was, we only a few times in I think in our country's history have we really lost an icon that made you feel as if, in Los Angeles. So there was almost every resident in Los Angeles felt like that was a family member. Because
absolutely,
it was so close to the Lakers, so, and we would feel that wherever we would go, there was Kobe jerseys in all these cities. And I would tell people, I'd say, there's two fan bases here. There's Kobe fans and then there's Laker fans. And when Kobe retired, I knew that would really affect the Lakers in some way because those Kobe fans went away. And then it came down to who were just the Laker fans. So, it was just so interesting, Mark. I could talk about him for so long.
Yeah, I miss him. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it just I remember that morning and hearing it, I just couldn't believe it. I called I texted one of his security guys because I knew that he was always right next to Kobe. So I thought, oh my gosh. I mean, maybe I'm not going to hear from him. And fortunately he was on the other end. But it just is, it's shocking that it can happen.
Watching a bad movie, waking up to a bad movie and go, what the heck just happened? A helicopter crash. And I actually called up his security guy and say, hey, what's up? How you doing? You hold up. He goes, man, I just can't believe it. He worked with Kobe for about 10 years with the Lakers organization. And he just told me a couple of stories about how when he worked with him, Kobe would not talk to him because he's in such business mode. And it took about 3 years for Kobe to start talking to him. And the next thing you know, Kobe's giving him basketball to his kids and for his kids and autographed and jerseys. And he said he's the most generous man he's ever met as an athlete. But it took years to build that trust with Kobe before Kobe trusted him.
Well, and then that's a great point. And I was going to say, I mean, as a shout out to your industry and to those of you in the security business, I mean, it really took me being alongside to realize why we had as many security and he had his own individual detail as he did, because, at first you think it's because somebody just likes to live in excess or thinks higher than themselves. But when you think of the danger that could come with any of his children have been taken that close to the border or anything, it's just, it's unthinkable. And you can't rule everything out. And I think that better than me. I'm speaking as an amateur, but I do know that being along the way and seeing our security in professional sports really change over the years. It's necessary now. It's sad, but it's necessary.
Yeah, as you know, as the audience viewers know, we're living in historical times in the United States, and Mexico's going through their problems, and there's just good and bad, good and evil everywhere, wherever you go, and it's part of humanity.
Well, and as I told you before, you realize you realize that these are American symbols, and so you have, we realized that because I was traveling with the Dallas Cowboys when 9/11 happened, and the Cowboys were the first team that went into New York to play the Giants. They first had the weekend where they didn't play any football because of what happened, and then the weekend after that, we went in there. We're on a chartered American Airlines plane that the Cowboys would fly on. But as we got close to New York airspace, 2 fighter jets came on the either side of the Cowboys plane to navigate them in, because at the time, not knowing who else could be in danger, a team known as America's Team had a little bit more extra security. And so so that was very interesting. The other was that I worked at ESPN, and that forced someone like ESPN to say, hey, if all of our operations are here in one campus in Connecticut, what happens if someone or something took this out? And that's really what created the second mega center at LA Live there to be created, because if something went down in Connecticut for any particular reason, or if you were a target of any particular reason of another American symbol, you had a fully functioning facility on the other side of the country. So, and then that just opened it up to, you could spread people out and do so many more things.
So is that the reason why LA Live was created, or that secondary?
I think a good redundancy. A redundancy at first. And then obviously because of the time change and everything, they just realized that they could produce more, they could produce more accurate, up to the minute sports centers late at night that people in the West Coast could watch, because by that time on the West Coast, some years you were just seeing a replay of the East Coast one. And so I think it all kind of went hand in hand, and sometimes in the big business world, you have to have a reason, a solid reason to outlay the money. And when you're owned by Disney, you have to justify everything that comes and goes. And so I think that really, really opened things up for the likes of a Disney or an ESPN to be American icons and realize that, life has changed now.
It has. And then we have COVID-19, and we're worried about the safety and security of the players. And thankfully, the players were able to perform and do what they love and perform and play basketball and play football, and that's their livelihood. And I'm glad the organizations were able to put those guys to work, and so they can pay their bills. And who knows what's going to happen in 2021? And now I'm hearing from my sources that COVID-19 is resurging in Europe now with a mutated virus or something, and they're getting ready to close down England again because of it.
I know, thinking about it from running something in the business world, part of what shakes our head, Mark, is just the unknown. It's not just the fear factor the way it was before, but it's just we're not all operating on the same rule book. And so then when it is over, or when it's safe to be over, who's going to make the call? Who says, okay, everybody back to work, and so everybody's now on their own agendas and their own rule books and their own handbooks. And I think that's why we'll look back someday, or if you're listening to this podcast a couple of years from now, you'll realize that, just like in the years after 9/11, life somehow in some ways never got back to the way we had it before.
Very good point. Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest concern, with the security guys, the bodyguards out there. They're wondering, when are we going to go back to work? And as long as there's a risk and the threat, like an enemy, you got to be cautious of how you move. And the virus, it is what it is. It's makes people very sick, and it's highly contagious. And the NFL, NBA, and all those organizations have to take protocols in place to ensure those safeguards are followed as protocols.
Yeah, and you know what? Another thing I salute of the safety and security industry is, the really good ones blend in, and it's I think I noticed that kind of develop more over the years when I was traveling with high profile teams and athletes, where it's just like, I knew them personally, but when I looked over there, it's just if I was just a person, that person several feet away, boy, they blended right in to the circumstance. And so I think it's been amazing the way they can provide that attention and that security without being noticed so much.
Yeah, I know there's a big thing about being covert now and not trying to bring attention to themselves, and that's the new thing, being plain clothes, and it's just it's almost used to be the guys in the black suit looking like Secret Service were the cool thing to have as a hood ornament is what we called it, and now it's like you're an attachment to the team, but you just don't want to outshine Kobe Bryant, and you just want to be in the back because he didn't want to interact with any security. He just wanted to play ball, like you said, as soon as he put that jersey on, he became an animal and got on that court. And it's just how security is. We just got to blend in, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you wouldn't. When Floyd Mayweather would come to a Lakers game, the guy that we called Tiny, the big guy that was about 5 times Floyd's size next to him, that you couldn't really hide and be non-discreet. But then there was always another guy that was about, sitting across court. That was also one of his details that you didn't even realize that guy was there for any particular reason. So, yeah, it's been amazing. I remember one time in Vegas, I asked Mike Tyson, I was like, why do you worry about security? Because, who's going to come up and bait you? But we knew that many people had tried it. And he's like, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at how many think, this is my time to try to get them. So, that's why even those guys had someone along with them.
Yeah, especially if they're going for the big fight or they got the big ticket or whatever, the big car they're going for, millions of dollars at stake, people waging bets on them in Vegas. It's you become a target. It's crazy how the mind works.
No, it's amazing.
What do you miss about the ESPN sports days? Do you have anything you really miss about those days?
You know what? It's a great question, Mark, and I wish I had a better answer. I've always been fairly good at pivoting and realizing that was a portion of my life and how much I enjoyed. And sometimes 110 or so nights on the road, you can only do that for so long. Wow. So, I miss the excitement, of being sometimes in a packed arena on a game 7 of a playoff series. But then again, I've kind of enjoyed sitting there and going to a game when we could go to games and have a beer myself and watch it as a fan and sit at home and watch it as well whenever I want to without having to get to the stadium, 4 hours before game time.
Oh wow, that's exhausting.
For baseball. For baseball, we would get to the stadium about 4 hours ahead of time because the manager would always want to talk to us about 3 hours before and do just tell us about thoughts and everything that was on his mind. And so I thought I just cannot believe we're spending like 8 total hours here at a ball game, but that was my life.
Wow. So how many days? 100 plus days?
There was years during some of my busy days traveling. Yeah, about 100 and some days.
And those weren't on private jets, were they?
No. Sometimes I was flying, regular, but a lot of them were team ones, so I wasn't getting the benefits of the airline miles. I had a heck of a lot of Marriott points, but
I'm sure.
That's one industry that's never changed. It's never gotten any more comfortable to travel 20 years ago than it is today. Because even the bed at the Ritz-Carlton is not as comfortable as your own home, and that the planes, the seats aren't any more comfortable than they were before. So it's funny. It's one industry that's never really evolved into making it better for us in our lives to do.
Traveling. Yeah, that's a good point.
Because
the young guys getting in the workforce, it'd be so cool to have a traveling job. You travel 50% of the time. Like, you don't know what you're thinking. You know what you're talking about. Until you get there and live it, you're like, give me a home in North Carolina, give me a bed in Southern Oregon or California when I'm down there working. And it's just like, nothing like your own home.
No, you try to spend, at most like 30 straight days on the road at an NFL training camp. Sometimes, you try eating good and maintaining good habits when you're on the road for that long. You just can't.
The weight comes on.
Oh man, it's just hard.
Become the Irish version of Santa Claus real quick.
Exactly. That's why that's why I could strike up a conversation with someone like you, because if you spend all your time in hotels and restaurants and the hotel bar, you have to learn to be interested in other people and to ask them about themselves or whatever. And that was always truly fascinating. And you were one of the ones that stood out.
Yeah, it must have been my Oregon roots, being raised in Southern Oregon. I was sitting there, I'm bored. And then we just started talking and, kind of enjoying the scenery of the area and see what's going on, people watching. And you got to do something. You sit in your hotel, you just get bored after a while. And you can only watch so much news, and it drives you crazy.
No, we forget that there's good old fashioned conversation, because everybody, wherever you go, they're fixated. Even when you look around a stadium, you're at a stadium or a concert, you look around, look how many people are looking at their phone instead of the action. It's amazing.
That's a great point. They're so involved with what's happening here, they forget what's going around here. It's like, that's what makes life. It's not really how popular you're on Facebook or social media. I mean, who really cares?
Yeah.
Are those people really your close friends? I mean, there's 1,000 followers on Facebook, and how many of them do you really know?
No.
And so I think we lose touch of that.
You know what? Because it's so funny, because I missed so many opportunities in my first 20 years of covering sports when I thought I missed it. Now, when I look back and I go, you know what? I don't have a picture of this said athlete who's a Hall of Famer now to show somebody and tell them. But you know what? In my mind, I remember the couple minutes that I got a chance to talk to him or do something else. So, to me, sometimes, we fumble around trying to get a selfie and a photo, and we miss the real moments to share, one-on-one with those guys.
Wow. The memories.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because a lot of times you can, back in the old days, guys were much more easily to approach, and athletes who were, a little bit more down to earth. That was another thing that made Kobe special, because he started at such a young age as a kid that he had to grow up quick. And so, he really knew how to mix, I think, the public life and the private life, which is not easy to do.
And I heard Michael Jordan is more standoffish, what I heard from different people that I've known.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, well, it's funny, Mark, because, he struggled as an owner.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys who were some of the best that we ever watched growing up, they've never been great coaches, because, a lot of times those guys, they have a very hard time being evaluators of talent, because they lived in a world where they were one of the best ever to play the game. And so they have a hard time looking for the next guy that might be really good at what they do, because they only had one vision. What they were, and that they could usually beat everybody that they ever competed against. So it's funny how it is. And I think just from what he had gone through and everything like that, he seemed probably more aloof than he would be gracious. But I do remember a lot of times. And the funny thing is that one of the things that eased me into knowing Kobe when I joined that broadcast was the fact that Shaq years before had opened Kobe up to that fact, because I covered Shaq when he was at LSU, and over the years had gotten to know him, and he would always just take care of me at the All-Star game or whatever. He'd always say, "Come over here, I'll do an interview with you." And he told Kobe one time, he said, "Take care of this guy." And so it was just one of those great things that Shaq did that Kobe then took on later on.
So you knew Shaq that back in his college days before he became the star that he is.
Yeah. Oh. His college coach, Dale Brown, and I, we still coordinate with each other and check in with each other. Yeah, Shaq was an amazing project, and back then, and how versatile he is.
Oh yeah.
He's really loved security and police and everything else along the way.
He's got that protective mindset, because I saw a video of him on some highway where he's helping some people that are broken down, fly down to the sheriff, make sure that the guys are okay, and then got them gas or fix their car on that video I saw. But he's always popping up random places. He's always popping up places. It's the funniest thing. But he has a heart for people. I've noticed that about Shaq.
Yeah. He was the ultimate competitor, but you're right. I mean, there's very few guys that you can say, they really have a heart for people. And and that's, a lot of the times people have their perceptions, and a lot of times I know athletes, I especially know coaches that I traveled with, that you don't know behind the scenes what they spent, what they gave money to, or whatever. And some of them are amazingly generous with what they've done over the years, and it's really those that didn't want the attention. They didn't want it known that they were very philanthropic.
Sometimes that's the best way to do it, be the silent giver that nobody knows about, because the person that does the giving gets the most satisfaction.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And really they leave the greatest impact.
Absolutely. So I think anything we get from this show is giving, being a servant, being a leader. And like Kobe, he was an animal, and you couldn't tell him no.
Yeah, well, and for him, it was never take an off day. I never saw Kobe think, his last year, he got, he knew that wherever he went, people were coming to the arena that night to pay respects to his last season in the NBA. And one night in Detroit, they loved him in Detroit as a competitor of the Pistons. And he got so sick. He told me he'd never been that sick. And when I saw him before the game, I said, are you going to go? And he said, they came here to see me. I'm going to try to play a couple of minutes. And you know what? He was so weak, he could hardly do it. He took a couple of IVs during the day, and lo and behold, he gave them a couple of minutes of something to remember. And that's the kind of guy he was.
Wow. Well, that's the best place to leave this at. Just that remembrance of Kobe Bryant. I can't really say much to that. The icon in sports. And thanks just for sharing your stories with the audience and the viewers of sports and ALS. And when we met, 10 years ago down there in Beverly Hills?
It was over. Yeah, it was 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago. I believe it was 2011.
I was just a baby in the business.
Well, now you're really making me feel old. No.
Wow, time has flown by. But I'm glad we've been able to stay in touch through Facebook, and I saw you. I'm like, you know what? I need to have Dave on this podcast, because the guy is ESPN legend, and everybody knows you, and just kind of share the stories you have with some of these athletes, just in remembrance of Kobe and everybody else, and just honoring him and your career and what you're trying to do with ALS now. And I'm sure you're going to be a major player in the medical world there with ALS. And
I appreciate you saying that, Mark, and I will stay in touch with you, because what you're doing here is good. You got to give people a chance to hear other people's perspective, and you do it because it's not about you. That was my favorite part about interviewing people. Was, I really could care less if they remembered who Dave Shore was. But I knew that I was a conduit. I knew that I was the only person that could ask some of these people questions. And, my years traveling with Bob Knight, he'd always say that he wasn't very patient about people in the media. And the thing that Coach loved about me was that I didn't have any prepared questions. I listened to his answer and then based my follow-up question on asking him something that he just said. So I always remember that my job was really, I was just kind of the conduit from the people and the public to some of the superstars. So I wanted to pull them inside and pull them behind the red ropes just a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of what I see my role here now. Never envisioned doing podcasting like we talked before, and all of a sudden COVID-19 hit. I'm like, I got to do something with myself. And then here we are. I'm like, if you had told me I'd doing this 3 months ago, I'm like, you're crazy.
Well,
but I'm have ball with it. I'm just having a lot of fun with it. And it's something that comes natural. And you've been offering me some coaching advice, and I appreciate that time of yours to do that. And I'm excited to see where this thing will go.
Yeah, well, that's the great thing about podcasting is, you listen, everybody's got their favorite things. Everybody's got their niche. And that's what podcasting provided. It provided an outlet for people that love only a certain thing to talk about it all the time. I mean, that's how we started years ago when fantasy football came around. We realized that suddenly we would care about the worst team in the NFL because we might have a player or two on that team. And so, that's when the NFL really took off, is when fantasy football and betting made it a little bit more doable to watch every single game a weekend instead of just for your favorite team. But here I go. I can't stop. I know.
You're a natural, buddy. Well, I'm sure we'll have you on again. We'll talk about something here soon. You're just a natural, and you liven it up quite a bit. And I'm learning a lot as I do this, and I learned a lot from you just today. Little tricks you taught me, and we incorporated that. That was fun. Changed it up a little bit.
Well, thank you. Anytime, Mark.